ADHD tonight. A little bit about myself. I'm one of them that's here at the middle school. I have been teaching in this field of special education for 17 years. I have worked here at the middle school for 5. That I worked with high school age students, K through 3 in a level 2 classroom for students with autism. I've also done vocational for 18 to 22-year-olds. So I've worked with all ages of children with learning disabilities and special needs. I'm also a mom of 4, and my kids are 13, 11, 8, and 6. And I, right now, I'm currently going through the evaluation process for ADHD for my own 8-year-old child. So I live this on a daily basis.
Hi, I'm Michael Jensen. I'm one of the education specialists over at the primary school. This is my 14th year doing this. I've been all over the world doing it. Started in Orange County, came down to San Diego, was over in Germany for a while at a national school. And now I'm here at the primary school for 3 years. Much like Kelly, I've worked in the entire range of disabilities, severities as well. I have one little boy, 5-year-old, at the school, at the primary school in kindergarten. And we're excited to have you here tonight. Like Kelly said, the emphasis is going to be on ADHD, but we know that ADHD it's comorbid with a lot of other disabilities, like autism, processing delays, and those sorts of things. So we will touch on those as well, and if you have any questions, please write them down as we go along. Our slides there's about 10 slides, and we can get through them pretty quickly. We did this last year, and we found that we had about 20 minutes to answer parent questions, and we could have gone all night with that. And so we want to make sure that we leave plenty of time for parent questions. We only have a lot, so please write them down as we go along. There's a lot of information on these slides, so please feel free to take out your phone and take pictures of this if you need to. We'll share them with you, like Kelly said. There's a lot of good information in this handout, so please make sure you get a handout. I want to talk about what it doesn't look like, what ADHD is not. There's a lot of myths out there, a lot of misunderstandings. One of the things I always hear is that people with ADHD are just lazy and they need to work harder. Myth, that's not true. You can have someone with ADHD work as hard as they possibly can and still struggle. Another myth would be
A lot of it too is behavior. Oh, they're just, they're always doing that. They're a bad kid. They get this this image of themselves as being the bad child, the one that's always in trouble. And I'll just tell you an interesting story that I had about my own child. Is the other day he got really mad at me, and he had heard his brothers mentioning something about ADHD, so he told me in a fit of rage that you had ADHD. And he used it in a derogatory term. So I sat with it and I let it go and I dropped him off to school. It was not an easy transition to school that morning. And then we got home later that night, and when he was in a calmer place, I wanted to unpack that with him because I did not want him to think that this was a negative thing, nor does it just define who he is as a person. So we sat down and I said, do you remember when you told me that I had ADHD? And he's like, no. And I was like, okay. So I went over it again. And then I said, what do you think that means? And he just looked at me, and I told him attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And he's like looking at me again. I said, you know what? It's a really, really long word for saying your brain works really fast. You got fast brain. You've got a lot going on in there. And he's looking at me. He's taking it in. I said, you've got all these things that you want to do. And he said, like, you're super smart, right? I said, absolutely. He goes, I want ADHD. Little does he know that he does. but I wanted to make sure he knew it was not a negative thing to have ADHD. There's so many amazing qualities with kids that have this. And those negative connotations that kind of go along with it, or the negative labels are not that. There's so much more. And a lot of that is their brain is always going. Their bodies are always moving. And that's just one form. You also have the child that may not have the hyper part of it, but their brain is always going. So they have a hard time focusing on what we're asking them to do. So when we go through some of our strategies and what it looks like in the primary years and what it looks like in the middle school years and how it differs from child to child. We want to emphasize all of the positive things and then the ways that we can help them with their not so wonderful little idiosyncrasies that come along with it.
And one last thing, ADHD is not, because a lot of parents that stress over this, it's not bad parenting. So we're gonna get into that, we'll talk about that as well. ADHD, there's three types of it. Just so you know, there's an inattentive type, there's hyperactivity, and sort of a mix of the two as well. They sort of speak for themselves when you hear those words. An inattentive type typically is found most often in girls where they're just tuned out, they're not paying attention to class. Whereas a hyperactive type is more someone who is fidgeting, is constantly moving, is up and down, is out in the seat, is running up doors, those sort of things. And then there's a mix between the two. So we're going to talk in more detail about those later as we go. But in the primary years, I just want to put this up here to sort of explain what it looks like in the primary years. If no tasks, whether it's writing, essay, or putting clothes away, is something that you might see at home. Organization, which is also the lacks executive functioning skills. So executive functioning are all those skills that require a purpose, have some sort of meaning behind it, like picking up your clothes, putting things away. Getting started on a writing task is one of those things where they have to process through a lot to get to the writing stuff. Okay? Clowns around in class and try to get everyone's attention. Gets restless during school, field trips, assemblies, especially if they're not preferred tasks. A lot of students with ADHD, when there's a not preferred task, you can see it. The hyperactivity is there, or the daydreaming is there. If it's oftentimes a preferred task, they just have laser focus, and they're able to concentrate so deeply on this. So this is a very strong skill for someone who has ADHD. Rushes through assignments, turns in messy work, careless mistakes, says or does things without thinking about the consequences, it's impulsive, works slowly, doesn't finish quizzes or assignments in a reasonable amount of time, has trouble following directions, which are the last step.
Middle school. We have some of the same characteristics that we see in middle school. The one thing that we try to make sure our teachers understand too is for those children that are not hyperactive, our eyes always go to the child that's saying that quietly. And they seem like they're doing what they're doing, what they need to be doing. And that child often will sometimes fall between the cracks and go under the radar because they're sitting there so quietly. So it's making sure that we're tuning in and we're checking in and our eyes are on them and we see if a student looks like they're busy but nothing's getting done, then we know that there's something going on there, that they're missing something. In middle school, we have trouble setting priorities. Executive functioning skills are super challenging in middle school. You've now gone from one classroom where you have one teacher and everything's in one room to class, 4 different classes, A days, B days, bringing PE stuff, making sure you have your lunch, remembering which homework needs to be done when. There's a lot that has to happen, so organization is challenging. Making lists and priorities. When I'm working with my students, when I have them in the afternoons, I have some of them in my learning lab. What we do built into our classroom is every time they come in, they know they take out their planner and then we go through our list of priorities. What has to be done this week? And then when we list them all on the board, then we rank them. What's our first priority? How do we know? We know that this is our first priority. It's due tomorrow. So if we don't have that down, that is what we have to focus on today. So as parents, when we talk go into what can we do at home too, it's helping them prioritize. It's helping them understand that it's not all of this that has to be done right now. This has to be done, but what needs to be done first? What is our priority? Ranking them. We talked about spacing out. The child sitting there and they're daydreaming, and then when you go and say, "Hey, do you remember what you need to do?" They don't remember. They've missed it. They need to reread information or ask people to repeat what they said. Some kids have this self-help skill, other kids do not. So we try to encourage the self-advocacy. If you didn't get something, ask somebody. Ask the teacher in your room, ask the peer buddy. They require a lot of prompting to support redirection. So they're always talking, and the minute they're redirected, they're talking again. And then the minute they're redirected, they're banging with their pencil, they're up out of their seat. We see that a lot. Get sidetracked so knowing that some students only be attentive and really locked in if it's on a task that they find interesting. We want to start to gear our lessons and our activities and things at home to focus on those areas. So if they're writing, if they're really into science and dinosaurs, then how can we bring that into other areas of their academics so that they have that attention, so that they're equally as interested in math as they are in science. Engages in risky behavior without thinking about consequences. This becomes more worrisome to us parents of middle schoolers because there's a lot more out there. So we're dealing with social media, we're dealing with influences from other peers, we're dealing with things that just naturally happen in areas that we're interested in, right? So now we have middle schoolers that in elementary we can still coddle them and keep them kind of safe. In middle school, you have all kids talking about all sorts of things. So we try really hard here to make sure we get ahead of that, but know that it is totally normal for kids to be interested in what is vaping, or this kid's doing this drug, and their perceptions are also very different too. Their perceptions are their perceptions and not necessarily the reality of the situation. Forgets to write down assignments or keep track of deadlines. That's super important. Has a hard time making friends and keeping friends. If the child is impulsive, and I see this with my own child as I'm going through the evaluation process. When they're impulsive, they don't have that button in their head. So they think of something, they do something. There's not that, wait, if I do this, what could happen? And then they react on the spot. And what that sometimes does is, at this age, especially in middle school, is the discrepancy between their peers starts to widen. And the peers start to become annoyed and irritated with them. And we try to build a culture of understanding and that celebrate differences, but we also have to help some of our children with ADHD understand how their behaviors are looked at or received upon by their peers, and also is this expected or unexpected classroom behavior, and that's what expected and unexpected social behavior. That's something we try to go over with kids frequently. They're disorganized. If your kid comes home and their bomb went off in their backpack, there's lots of those. That it's hard for them to find assignments. It's hard for them to find their homework that was given to them the other day. So this organization is huge. Pencils. One day they have pencil, the next day they don't. There's a lot of them missing pencils. And then the difficulty with impulse control.
Okay. Talk about this for a second. A lot of myths and misunderstandings about medication. Right off the bat, it works for some, not for others. Okay? You're going to talk to your doctor about ADHD. Have the conversation about medication, but it's important to understand that medication doesn't cure anything. It's just a tool in your toolbox to help you address any concerns there may be. So when you think of a toolbox, if you were to build a house and you had nails and a hammer, you could probably build a house. It might take a while. But if you had a lot more tools, the quicker and more effective that would be. And so it's important to look at medication as one of those tools. So what are the other possible tools? There's collaboration with your classroom teachers. We're going to know a little more of this later. Collaborating with them, talking to your doctor in ways that you can help at home, talking to the staff as well, and on ways you can organize your house. There's planners, there's charts, there's different things that you can do. There's other tools to help organize your kid, because sometimes what may work for one student with medication doesn't work for another. Okay? But it's important to have that conversation with the doctor. Also, a lot of people are afraid to have their child tested for ADHD, or they're concerned about it because they think because you have ADHD, you now have to take this medicine. Like, you have diabetes type 1, you must take insulin. It doesn't work that way. Okay? So again, have that conversation. It's one of these things that can really help your child with an IEP or a 504 plan to help them get the things at school that they need for testing situations or for homework. And like Kelly was saying, a lot of times these students just need extra time to get things done. And you can actually have that written down on a piece of paper that is a federal document that schools have to pay attention to. So it's important to have this conversation with your doctor, because schools can't diagnose this. Okay? The doctor has to diagnose this, but when that is diagnosed, we can at least do something with that. We can do, well, I should say we can do more with that.
Mhm.
But, so it's important to have it. Again, it's good for some, not for others, but it's just important to at least talk about it. So there's that.
Another area that we also sometimes lead parents to is to consider therapy, outside of therapy. What we notice a lot in middle school is some of our children with ADHD suffer from low self-esteem. There's a lot of low self-esteem from years of always being redirected, or why aren't kids talking? And they themselves don't understand their ADHD and how it affects others and affects themselves. And going through some counseling sessions, whether it be a family component or in just the child itself, sometimes really helps both build self-esteem and self-help skills, and helps an overall understanding for the entire family. Because, and I'll speak from my own experiences, my child that's 8 has a pretty turbulent relationship with his siblings. They're annoyed by him. He annoys them. He can go from 0 to 10 very quickly, and then I'm refereeing most of the time. So I have tried the therapy route with him. It worked a little bit, but he doesn't yet have that control factor where he can stop and think and then implement those tools. So for me and my child, I am going to try different areas. Medication may be a route I'm going to try, and maybe medication in conjunction with counseling will help him build up his self-esteem, will help him with his social skills and his relationships, and to identify ways to calm himself before he goes from 0 to 10 very quickly. But this is, again, like Mike has mentioned, it's a family decision. And you have to know your child, and you have to try different areas and find the best fit for your child.
Anybody have any questions about this before we go any further? No? Okay. So there's a lot on this slide. I understand, but maybe you can take that picture if you like. But I put this up here because these are all the basic things that we do here at Einstein to address any students that have these concerns. Okay? So there's a lot that we do. There's some things that are very important that if you have a 504, if you have an IEP, you want to make sure that you have extra time for tasks. Break assignments into smaller chunks. Okay? These are accommodations that they can have on exams, not just in primary years, but also that. Okay? What's the purpose of having extra time? Well, I have a lot of students that, for example, have to take these tests that are they're boring tests. I just look at these tests and it's just a whole entire passage they have to read, 3 questions to answer about it. Then they go to the next passage, and it's the same thing, 3 questions, and there's like 50 questions. And it is tough. And so they'll read the passage, look at the end of it, and they'll be done with reading the passage. Tune out for a couple minutes, and now they have to answer the questions. That's just question 1. And so being able to have the extra time to be able to process all this stuff, and being able to work through it at their own pace is very important, because we're not testing how fast they can take these tests. We're testing the knowledge that they have. We're testing their comprehension. Do they understand what the test is all about? Breaking assignments in smaller chunks. Again, a lot of kids with ADHD have poor time planning. That's one of those executive functional skills. And if you, for example, in 5th grade, we're about to start the exhibition, which is a several month-long process of researching, putting things together for an assignment, and then putting together a presentation for that. If someone with ADHD looks at that and just sees the entire wall of wax and is just overwhelmed by it, and they avoid it. Right? And so breaking it into smaller tasks. As a parent, this is something you can do. Just do the first thing. What's the first thing? Let's do that and move on to the next thing. And you can help them plan that out so by the time the assignments due, that they're able to do that.
manageable pieces, because it can become very overwhelming. So when we look at different assignments, and most of the time, at least here in the middle school, is you have a significant amount of time if it's a big project. So it's teaching the kids, let's not waste that last minute. I know it's not preferred, and maybe it is preferred because they could build a project. So that's, it's some kids excited because it's hands-on, it's not writing. But not waiting until the week before, but how can we break it up into little chunks, into a little bit at a time, so that it's not overwhelming them, and then when they're done, it's that sense of accomplishment, and they feel proud. And that's ultimately what we want. We want them to have good self-esteem, to feel proud of themselves, and not fall under that negative stigma.
And there's two things on here I want to point out too. It goes back to how people think people with ADHD are lazy, and that's the lecture outline, note-taking peers, or even having the teacher take the notes and copy them again to the student. It's very important because I have a student I'm thinking of right now who sits in class and he's able to get a good 3 minutes in, and then it's just he's tuned out. And so to be able to get those notes from the teacher, give them to him, and I even have him copy them down, so there's still a little bit of responsibility that he has to do with that. It's so important because it's not that he's willfully ignoring what's happening in the classroom and trying to be defiant or anything, but he needs that extra support, and so the student is very successful.
Yeah, so there is a lot on here. Choices is another good one. When it's something that they don't want to necessarily do, it's non-preferred. How can we take something that they're non-preferred and give them a choice? Do you want to write a paragraph, or would you like to orally present your response to the teacher? Giving them a choice, then there's more buy-in. And when they have buy-in, they'll be more willing to follow through and complete it. Another thing is just the short, specific directions. If we give so much information up front, it's lost. So to just kind of the Cliff Notes version, or just the meat and potatoes, as we often say, what do we want them to do and how do we want them to get there? So to remove a lot of that verbiage and keep it short and sweet, and then it's not so overwhelming.
So we'll have time for questions at the end, but did anybody have any questions about this side? Yes?
I have a question about the middle school, okay? Like you said, some projects, they gave extra time because it's gonna be a harder project.
Correct.
How as a parent, besides ask your son, what do you have, what you don't have? Yet, it's not in the calendar to manage back. Because in the calendar, you see the due, but you don't know when they gave to them.
Okay.
You know, then you know, oh, they gave it in 3 months, you have a due. In 2 weeks, you have a due, and 5 days. Because then you realize, oh, it's a small project, it's a big project, and you have to help focus, And I'm being lost about that, how to find out when they get the projects.
I appreciate that. We've had planners in the past. What grade is that?
One is 7th grade and 3rd grade, but
Okay.
also 7th and 7th grade.
So we've tried paper planners, and then a lot of times they've gotten lost. I do have them. I bought them for my own 6th grade cohort, my students this year, because I just find I'm a paper pencil person. And if things are on the computer, it's like out of sight, out of mind for me. And I feel like for kids, that's a good skill to have, is to write it down. I know the teachers use ManageBot. I as ManageBot user-friendly as Ms. Julius is, and she kind of runs ManageBot, and the teachers do. But I appreciate your question, and that's something that I will take up with our academic council when we meet, because I don't know, I don't know. I don't know if it comes up when it's due, or when it's assigned. So I appreciate that, and that's good feedback to have.
I think as a parent, this is something that you can do at home. I know a lot of people are probably wondering, what are some things I can do with my child who may have ADHD? Be that parent who's emailing the teachers. Be that parent who's constantly saying, what's this? What does this do? How much time do we have for this? Because you need to know these things. And it's totally reasonable to be sending emails, making phone calls to the teachers and saying, hey, when was this assigned? You know, how can you help me with planning this out? All that stuff. And teachers aren't afraid to get a lot of emails. So
I'm
I
fine with that.
don't know, I would rather get more than less. Okay, so. Next slide, strategies and tools at home. So, this isn't a pure slide. Kelly, I don't know if you want to start off talking about this, but.
Yeah, sure. If you're parenting a child with ADHD, depending on your child and their disposition, it's rough. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I am exhausted some days. And sometimes I question my parenting skills, and you know, some days are great. It all depends. But I do know there's some things that we can do at home that help our children be successful as they can. Unstructured time is a nightmare for me. Summer, like, I dread summertime because it's a lot of unstructured time. And when there's unstructured time, there's a lot of time to get into trouble and to make poor choices. So I try really hard. I have a strict routine when I get home. And they were laughing at me because I ran home from work at 3 and I bathed my kids and fed them dinner and did homework and got their clothes out, their lunches were made, and got them all set so I could come back down here. But I have a super strict routine, and I find that during the week, that's really helpful. My kids know what time they're going to bed. I do my best to make healthy meals. I don't love to cook, so sometimes but we try. They know when they come in the door that they hang up their backpack, they unpack their backpack, they put their homework on the table, and then they have their little chores. Before the TV goes on, or you want to play a game, all this stuff needs to get done. So it's a checklist that they know they have to follow.
And you use visual schedules?
I don't, but I have in the past. So when they were littler, I used visual. Now they're pretty self-sufficient. I mean, I do the same thing literally every day. It's like Groundhog's Day. And by now they should have it, but they don't. But I do. It's a very predictable routine for them. They know what's going to happen, and they also know. And this is my age group too. If he does not do this, then there is a consequence that mom is following through with. You're not going to get TV. I'm sorry. He got a watch for Christmas or for his birthday a few weeks ago, and I gave him plenty of warnings. Hey, if you don't do this, and if you continue to do that, the watch is going to be mine. And as much as it pains me to take the watch from him because he loved it, I have to follow through with that. Because a lot of times we will get into power struggles with them, and it's not worth the power struggle. To set the boundary and to follow through, because then they know that there's structure. And for them, that structure is very comfortable. They want structure, they need routines. That's why that summer and when there's no predictability causes anxiety. And we know with children that have ADHD or learning disabilities, there's sometimes often other underlying conditions, right? ADHD sometimes goes hand in hand with, anxiety sometimes goes hand in hand with ADHD. Oppositional defiance disorder sometimes goes hand in hand with ADHD. So you're dealing with different layers. It's like an onion. You're pulling them back. We never know everything. We only see what's on the outside, and we see the behaviors, but we don't always know what's happening on the inside. So you, as parents, know your children the best and can predict what's going to happen or why they're doing that. But if we have a routine in place, that's one structure that's predictable and can eliminate some of those feelings that are happening underneath the surface. Clear expectations is another one. They need to know what's expected, and there has to be rules. They need this. They need to know where the boundaries are. If they don't, again, that's unpredictable, and it causes stress. It causes anxiety. So we're hardworking parents. We do our best. Some days we just don't want to have to follow through or to do this, but we have to do it for them because it's what they need to be successful at home. And then the follow through and accountability. And a lot of times students, whether it's at school or at home, the empty threats, they pick up on that. They're smart and they know oh, you said I wasn't gonna get dessert and I got it anyway, and now you just kind of lost that leverage, right? So you have
It's a
to.
bigger battle next time.
It's a bigger battle next time. Oh, I'm gonna see that. They know, oh, mom said or dad said, I wasn't gonna get it, and I got it anyway, because I said, please, I'm sorry, and they'll manipulate and try to work that the best they can. They're smart kids, they know what they're doing. So you have to have that follow through. If it's something that you cannot follow through with, don't make it as your threat. Okay, keep it simple. If it's, for my 8-year-old, dessert. He wants dessert. So I pulled the dessert card, I can follow through with that.